to represent in Congress. And so what this does is, for the first time, now makes it an item of debate the person who comes to make a claim or a protest against their House or Senate member. And I think that is a big deal, because it, again, goes to that larger notion of upsetting balance of power that the Founding Fathers thought to be very, very important. Two last points. One is what this bill involves is the creation of a central depository for citizens' personal information. And rather than, and I mean this with all sincerity, and again, I mean it respectfully, these are meant as constructive criticisms. Rather than having data spread across 50 different states, it would be centered in one. And I think that if you look at the history of security, from the time of Pearl Harbor going forward, at the military level, they've been about spreading assets, not about keeping everything in the same place, but about spreading it across. Over the last 3 years alone, there have been 40 million Americans whose personal data has been compromised as a result of either nefarious or at times just plain curious work of hackers or negligence. I mean, you may have read in the papers here recently about a teenager getting into the Pentagon database because he was hacking. Maybe it was out of boredom. Maybe there was a nefarious purpose. But the fact is, was able to get into something as secure as a Pentagon database. You may have read about the VA files for 26 million Americans being lost because oh, you were? I'm sorry. The information was, again, against protocol, against procedure, put into a laptop, and that laptop was loose. You may have read about, the personal passport information of the three presidential contenders being, opened up by a curious federal worker. I mean, there are all kinds of different reasons, but to err really is human. And given that that's the case, doesn't it make more sense from a security standpoint to have that data spread across 50 states as opposed to centered in one? And finally, we think that there are very substantial loopholes currently within Real ID that would render it a lot less effective than proponents might otherwise suggest. As you know, Real ID has no standing in foreign countries. And what this means is that somebody could get a foreign passport, and if they want to do nefarious or bad things in the United States, come to the United States under a foreign passport, and there's not one thing that Real ID would do about it. And so if we go to the cost, substantial cost, and to the inconvenience of putting a lot of things in motion for folks at a state level, I think it's incumbent upon folks at the federal level to make sure that those same precautions can't be basically circumvented at a foreign level. But the current law would do that. Secondly, what's even more interesting is that the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, there was an affirmative decision that basically declared that anybody could get on a plane without any form of identification as long as there was a pat-down search. So I keep going back to the reality that if a terrorist was going to come with some sinister intent, would they really go through the loopholes that are now described within the Real ID, or would they go without any form of ID altogether, or would they go with a foreign passport? I just think that there's substantial things that really ought to be worked out before we move forward on this bill. And I've, again, respectfully submitted those thoughts to the Secretary himself, and that's where we are right now. Questions from y'all's end?
Governor, so basically you're saying we have from today until May 11th, the compliance is required to get some kind of work from Washington as to whether, since we meet 14 of the 16 guidelines, we're okay?
Again, that's our hope. What we're asking for is that they treat us as they've elected to treat Montana and New Hampshire. We don't know yet how they're going to treat a couple of other states, but we know in those two instances they had a law in the books that prevented them from filing for extension, and yet they had made substantial and real and measured progress in making their licenses more secure, which I think is certainly a thing that every state wants to do out there, given the age that we live in. And they were granted an extension so that their citizens wouldn't be hardshiped. We think that makes sense, and that's certainly our request.
Governor, Attorney General Confrence said recommended that you lay out what the state is already doing. Is that essentially what you've done in this letter?
Yeah, I have a copy for all of you guys. It has been given to you, or it'll go, right at the end of the press conference, you'll have a letter, and you can look at all the things we've done. I can get Marcia to walk through them if you'd like painstaking detail.
But what you're doing is you're showing the federal government what South Carolina's already done without making the overt action of telling the federal government to comply with the law.
Correct. I mean, our view is that the statute's clear. I mean, you know, and we think that the House and Senate got it right the first time. I mean, they've gotten nervous here at the end and have, in essence, reversed themselves with a non-binding resolution. As we all know, a non-binding resolution is nothing more than a resolution. The thing that was law was the thing that was done a year ago, and that's what we have to go by.
Understanding all the things that you've laid out, knowing that we're already 14 steps of 16 in, why not just take the 2 extra steps? It seems like we're that close. Why not just finish it up?
Well, two reasons. One is we have a law in the books that says we can. I put my left hand on the Bible, I raised my right hand, I swore to uphold the Constitution and the laws of the state. And so, one is, and this goes to the heart of the problem with the non-binding resolution. We can't just run for cover when people get anxious about what's this mean for my travel plan or other things. I mean, we've got to go with the law that's on the book. So the law is unequivocally clear that we cannot participate in this thing. So, I mean, that's sort of the be-all and end-all as to why. But we think that this is an appropriate moment to, again, humbly and respectfully suggest to folks at the federal level that we go back and look at this thing for all the reasons that I just walked through. It is a substantially flawed piece of legislation that if somebody doesn't raise some of these, I don't think they will be raised. So we thought it was also important to raise them with the hope that folks at the national level review.